All right, so this afternoon we have Ariane Resnick, and she is speaking for the third time at the LiveAware conference. Everybody loves listening to her, so she keeps coming back, and we keep loving having her back. So Ariane is a special diet chef and certified nutritionist whose private clients include an array of celebrities. She's written 4 books, and we'll go through what she's learned about sort of being sick and getting well again. And I think it came from her personal journey, but she's taken that so far beyond and is helping so many people with her knowledge. So I'm so happy to have you here again. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. I assume you're the clicker. So this is a talk based on the principles of my book, How to Be Well When You're Not. It came out in September of last year. Today I will be reviewing my own chronic illness journey and why I consider being sick for half a decade one of the best things that ever happened to me, which is a somewhat unusual perspective, I'm aware. We will discuss the science behind a wellness mindset and what even wellness mindset means, emotional wellness and examples of it, physical wellness, examples of it, spiritual wellness, examples of it, and the value of intuitive eating, how nutrition and diet play into wellness. So my journey through chronic illness is 2-part. The first part was multiple years spent with late-stage neurological Lyme disease. I presume that I got it in 2008 in Cape Cod because the only areas of Southern California where I live where it's been found are in mountains that you have to hike to, which is not a thing that I ever do. I spent time in Cape Cod where it is prolific. My best guess is therefore that I got it there. And Lyme disease is something that a lot of people are exposed to and never actually get sick with. And when that happens, and your body does manage to fight it off until eventually it doesn't, that is much, much worse than when you get sick right away. There's acute Lyme disease and then late stage. Acute is what we know of where you get bit by a tick, you see a bullseye rash, and you get antibiotics. This is one instance where I am a huge advocate of antibiotics because typically if you take them for 2 to 4 weeks, you kill the infection, end of story. There are cases where it reoccurs even with that, but for the most part, it's very effective if you catch it right away. The other side of things is when you get bit by a tick or potentially a mosquito and you have no idea. So that happened likely to me, but I was fine. And nearly a year later, all of a sudden, I began having a lot of really weird symptoms. They were mostly not even physical, or not what we know of as physical illness symptoms. I became very clumsy. I became very weirdly emotional, where I would cry for hours on end, unconsolably. And I would retreat to the back of my closet and sit in a pile of shoes and just want to die, with absolutely no idea why. I was someone who had always been a perfectly happy person, had never had issues with depression, anxiety, anything else. My emotions were incredibly uncontrollable. I would experience rage and a level of suicide wanting that I had never experienced before. So I knew something was drastically wrong with me, but I had no idea what it was. And for the most part, for a number of months, it appeared to be in my head. As time went on and I began experiencing physical symptoms as well, I started seeing practitioners to find out what was wrong. The response I got from doctors was completely that it was in my head. It was only through an experience with acupuncture, where when he was taking a needle out of my ankle, and I was seeing him saying, I don't know what's wrong, there's something going on in my body. I had a feeling it was in my blood, but I had no idea what was happening. He took the needle out of my ankle and said, there's something drastically wrong with you. Your blood is orange and runny. and I looked down, and my blood was not my own. It was the color of dark salmon instead of cherries, and it had no viscosity. It was just dribbling like water. So that experience solidified that there was something physically wrong with me. And it took, from that point, probably another year of research to get to the right medical practitioner to find out what it was. I was diagnosed with late-stage neurological Lyme disease, which means at that point it has infiltrated you neurologically, top to bottom, along with Hashimoto's thyroid disease, hormone dysfunction, and a whole host of other things. I was told that my only option was a year minimum to begin of multiple antibiotics at once, doxycycline, tetracycline, and fluoroquinolones, all simultaneously. And that once we finished that year of oral antibiotics, I would then be able to move on to intramuscular or intravenous antibiotics for years of those. I come from a ridiculously holistic background with a mom who ran a co-op out of our basement as a child. So I resorted immediately to my family because I knew that there was no way that that could be a course of treatment for me. When I looked into it, that course of treatment doesn't even yield very good results. It's not even a 2/3 cure rate. It's more like about a third with a 2/3 recurrence rate after that. So that was all that was presented, and it was essentially on me to find out what to do about it. I very thankfully had family resources. This was about a decade ago, so it was not in the media as much as it is now. It was not acknowledged as an illness as much as it is now. I very thankfully was able to get this completely eradicated holistically on my own. The experience of it was one that by the time it was done, I was moderately grateful for, because it changed me in ways that I felt I needed to be changed. I was a very judgmental, not the nicest person before, and it humbled me in ways that were very necessary. I had spent the bulk of my 20s after college modeling, and it was very effortless for me to be quite thin. I'm a naturally small-boned, slight person. When people would ask me, "How do you stay so thin?" I would respond with something like, "Don't eat so much." So here I was 30 pounds later with absolutely no control over my body, understanding it's a lot more complex than that. And that was really horrible of me to say to people with absolutely no knowledge of what was happening in their body, just because I had been fortunate enough to be 20-something with a great metabolism and small bones. So there were a whole lot of ways in which it made me a better person, and I was happy for it. But I thought I was done, and I still did not have any sort of sense of purpose. Cue less than 1 year later, I moved into an apartment with a gas issue. It made Lyme disease look like the flu. By the time the gas issue had been found out, it was about 6 months later, so that was 6 months of slow, low-dose carbon monoxide and combustion byproduct poisoning. My ex's cat died of kidney failure in the process because it killed him. She was out of the home, whereas I had been working in the home. By the time I got that diagnosis, I was an absolute disaster. The physical symptoms were very strong, but mostly I had no brain. I couldn't complete any task. I was given a formal diagnosis of Alzheimer's from Cedars Sinai, which is a thoroughly reputable hospital. I was told, similarly to Lyme disease, to go get comfortable. Only this one, no one knew what at all to do with me, because carbon monoxide poisoning kills. People get a gas leak and they die. Most people don't survive that. Most people don't have a tiny little problem infiltrating their apartment slowly but surely day after day. It's very rare to have a slow, low-dose situation of it. And when you do, no one knows what to do with you. I saw all the doctors that the lawyer I had for the apartment suggested. No one had any clue whatsoever. I had a lot of psychiatric and evaluative testing done for the lawsuit against the landlord, which showed that my formerly genius IQ was very much in the toilet. And I had an array of emotional disorders, depression, anxiety, all sorts of things. I couldn't complete any tasks. I had to stop cooking even for myself because I had a habit, and you only have to do this 1 or 2 times before you realize it's not an acceptable or tenable habit, where I would be making something and I would reach into the oven with no oven mitts. And I burned myself quite horribly. Told to go get comfortable. Somehow, also with a lot of help from family, figured it out. Diet, and mostly supplements. The #1 supplement that I credit to my recovery is a form of magnesium called magnesium L-threonate, which is used in treatment for Alzheimer's patients. I got all of my faculties back, and the only caveat is that I can never stop taking that form of magnesium. If I stop taking it for about a week, I become completely dyslexic. I mix words with other words, I mix numbers with other numbers, and I mix letters in words. So it is a multifaceted dyslexia that I don't experience or live with as a human at large. So I remain dependent on this form of magnesium for the remainder, presumably, of my life, and that is an incredibly small price to pay. Lyme disease didn't give me any sense of purpose. Definitely made me a better person, but when I got better from carbon monoxide poisoning is when I realized I'm someone who can get better, and I can share that with other people. After that, it happened almost immediately that my life changed, and it went very quickly in a very exciting direction. I realized that my purpose was to help others feel better. I opened myself up to whatever that might mean, and everything took off. I was established as a chef because I had a brand of raw vegan snacks in stores, but I didn't feel like cooking was particularly my purpose. I considered myself a writer, and I got a degree in creative writing, but I never had opportunities to write. If I did, they were very low-paid content work that was essentially ghostwriting. It was never my voice. I realized why I was here, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, opportunities to cook purposefully and to write completely fell in my lap. Some of the highlights of that, being on The Doctors. Like, how amazing to be considered so credible that you're on a daytime talk show. Speaking in large arenas, like the Bulletproof Conference. Hallmark Home and Family. I'm a crazy-haired, tattooed girl on the Hallmark Channel. That was remarkable. When my book came out, things about how she backed me up, and this was on like Life and Style. And now, as of January, after many years freelance and deciding that I had done all I could on my own and I wanted to do something bigger, for a month and a couple weeks now, I am the corporate wellness director for a large restaurant group. I put healthier food in restaurants. That's amazing. I took what I do and my desire to bring it to more people outside of just books and articles, and I get to actually give it to people. And I'm fortunate enough to be with a restaurant group that has about 50 restaurants throughout America that range hugely from top-of-the-line fine dining to counter service fast casual. And there is opportunity for me to work in all of those places, improving their menus. And that is what I have been doing. If you can find the purpose in adversity, you can thrive. If it weren't for what I went through, I wouldn't be who I am, and I wouldn't be doing what I do. I credit having been sick with my success. And in all the media I've done where they hear about it and they say, I'm so sorry, I say, no, that's the wrong response. It was the best gift that I could have been given. What is a wellness mindset? It is something that I speak about a lot in my book, How to Be Well When You're Not. Basically, the belief that you can feel better has been statistically proven to increase your chances of recovery. It's real. The ability to think positively when everybody says think positively makes you more likely to get better from anything. It works across the board, from chronic illness to a minor ailment to surgery. It's a great idea, but no one tells you how to do it. When you feel lousy, it's not really possible to just change your mentality. One thing that I experienced in chronic illness was a lot of sadness. You're so alone. It's just you and your body not feeling good. So how do you decide to feel good? No one tells you. They just tell you to think positively. And they're right, it works, but we aren't given the tools needed for it. So I'm going to walk through examples for all the different facets of wellness, things that you can do that are completely free and take very little time to be able to shift into a wellness mindset. One example at large, before getting into each of the individual areas, is befriending your body. I had a standout experience around the beginning of my recovery from Lyme disease, where I had a session with my therapist, who I saw due to the emotional issues from Lyme disease, where I wasn't able to get out of the house. I was too sick. So we had a session on the phone. I told her that I felt I was at war with my body and I could not win. She said, the only way to win a war is to not fight in it. If you befriend your body, you have a chance at recovering from this. So I work very in depth with the idea that your body has to be your buddy rather than your adversary. When you go to sleep at night, when you wake up in the morning, your body is all that's with you. It's all you've got. We have our minds, we have our souls. The only physical representation of ourselves is our body. And we are so unkind to our bodies. If you think about how much time you spend telling your body it's doing things wrong versus congratulating your body for all it does right, my guess would be that it is much more time spent on the wrong than time spent on the right. There is no physical wellness, I do not believe, without emotional wellness, because everything begins in your mind. It's where you live. Gratitude is the easiest way to feel good. So it can be hard to feel grateful when you feel lousy. The quick and easy solution for that is to find anything that feels okay and to sit with that feeling. If you have your senses, 4 out of 5, let alone all of them, you are hugely privileged. If you have running water and a home with heat and electricity, you're better off than the great majority of the world. But we don't think about that day to day. We just think, woe is me, because that's what feeling bad leads us to think. So finding anything you can that feels good and focusing on that makes a world of difference. One example that I find very interesting is the science behind thank you notes. People feel better biologically and physiologically in studies after the act of writing a thank you note. It can be to anyone about anything, and the thing that's the most fun about it is you don't even need to send it. It works just from the act of writing it. It physically makes you feel better to acknowledge something nice that someone has done for you. If you do choose to send it, science has also shown that people who receive thank you notes experience incredible physical and biological impacts and effects from them, that it literally makes us happier in our cells. So that's one very small example of something that you can do to feel better, that you wouldn't necessarily think of, that's free, that doesn't even take much time. Physical wellness is something that I think in our culture has been really kind of skewed into this idea that whatever you are doing is not enough. And I think that there is only success when we realize that you can always do something. And whatever that something is, it's enough. Whatever is you giving your best is all there is. We have this idea that there is something better we should be doing and achieving, that we should be faster, bigger, stronger. There's no answer. There's no end. It's not a way of thinking that actually leads to anyone ever feeling good. And one of the most difficult things when you're feeling lousy is to actually be present in your body, especially if it hurts, especially if it's feeling older and you don't enjoy that. But there's also no way to feel better in your body if you're avoiding the act of being in it. So this is a really neat thing that we'll spend like a minute on. Many forms of breath work have amazing science backing them up. Alternate nostril or cyclical breathing is a form of breath work that is incredibly easy, that studies have shown reduces both anxiety and depression when done consistently for 5 to 7 minutes a day. So we're going to walk through that very quickly. It's one of those things that once you've done it, you can do it on your own quite easily. You take a hand and you put it covering one nostril. You breathe in through that nostril, all the way. Once your breath is full, you cross to the other side and you breathe out. Then you breathe in through that nostril, cross to the other side, and breathe out. In through that nostril, cross to the other side, and breathe out, and back and forth. 5 to 7 minutes a day of that, science has shown, decreases depression and anxiety. In my experience with very simple breath work like that, when I begin it, especially if I'm doing it with like a set amount of time and a timer, I feel very angry and I feel kind of cheated because I remain convinced, no matter how many times I do it, that it's not going to do anything for me. Every single time. And I am someone who has been meditating faithfully for a bunch of years now. But every single time I sit down to do it, I'm like, this is such a waste of my time. Why am I bothering? There are so many better things I could be doing. 2, maybe 3 minutes. I'm the happiest person I've ever met. And it happens every time. Spiritual wellness. This is very different than religion, but it ties in very deeply. Science has shown that it does not matter what you believe in. Your chances of recovery from anything are improved simply by a belief in anything bigger than yourself. So that can be your religion, or it can be you being really, really into flowers. It doesn't matter. The idea that you think you're living for something, that there's a greater good, that there's a higher purpose, is all you need. So a lot of people have a very difficult time separating the dogma of religion from their personal spirituality. And I like this because it shows that if religion is something that doesn't feel good to you, that's fine. Those people in churches are not physically getting anything more out of it than you in your living room. An example of spiritual wellness, and this seems so simple, and it is so simple. Getting in touch with love. If you think about society, movies, TV shows, radio, concerts, how much of our cultural fictional dialogue is centered around love? A lot of it. The hero gets the person. Songs that are sad are about losing the person. The story's not over until love has won. If you're talking a, quote, Hollywood ending, that's exactly it. Love has won. The idea of love is something that you can always be in touch with, no matter what is currently going on in your life. If you think about your child or your parent, the love you feel for them right now, they're not here. But if you tune into that feeling, it's completely real. They don't need to be here. I told my mom a few years ago, after having been someone who was very dependent on her for a lot of years, where into my 30s I would call her and say, what do I do about almost everything? She, in my late 30s, went through cancer, told me that she knew she survived it because my sister and I could not live without her. So a few years ago, she was very, very taken aback when I told her that she was free to go at any time. She was initially upset. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I said, I found you. I found the place of you inside of me, and you'll always be here. And you can go anytime because I have you. And that took me a lot of years. But that feeling, we all have those feelings. And those feelings are everything. They're why we're alive. If you can get in touch with anything that you love, you will feel better. And now, what food has to do with it. Because I'm a nutritionist, people always think I want to tell them what to eat, and tend to be very surprised that I do not. In my wellness book, the intuitive eating section, my publisher insisted that I call it a meal plan. So I did get away with having the text of that first paragraph be, spoiler alert, this is not a meal plan. I am not actually going to tell you what to eat, because I don't think that I have any right as a person who does not inhabit your body to tell you what your body wants to eat. For one thing, you know better than I do. And for another thing, bodies change. I was a vegetarian for over 30 years. My parents stopped eating meat when I was around 8. In recent years, I cooked it for clients, but I mostly refused to taste it if possible. I had no taste for it, I didn't enjoy it, and my body had no interest. About 2 years ago, my body decided that it was time to eat meat. And it did it in a very unpleasant and voracious way. I had so much guilt around eating meat that I would purchase it and I would cook it and I wouldn't even put salt on it because I didn't think that I should be able to enjoy it. Friends told me very quickly that that was quite unhealthy emotionally, that if my body wanted it, I needed to learn how to enjoy it, because it was only honoring what my body wants if I wasn't putting a lot of guilt into it. That's an example of how you feel about what you eat being as important as what you eat. For the record, I am really, really into meat, and I eat it in all capacities now, and I have never, ever felt better. Stress hormones have a very important function in our body. They create a fight or flight response. When you feel stressed, your blood goes to your muscles because your body thinks that it's needed there so that you can go. So if you eat while feeling stressed, you don't actually have the blood needed in your digestive system because it's busy being in your muscles. So the food that you eat while stressed, when you're stressed about the food you're eating, you can't digest it. It doesn't matter if it's broccoli or a donut. If you're feeling stressed about it, your body can't use it and do anything with it. What matters about what you eat is not that it be from this list or that list, but that you're eating what you feel good about, because that is the only food that your body actually has an opportunity to use. The way that I work with people and what the eating plan in my book actually is tracking feelings to foods. The only way to know the right foods for you is to figure out how the foods you eat actually affect you. We have so much dogma. I spent the first 20 years of my life being told meat was the problem. My parents decided when I was 20 that carbs were the problem. Carbs were the devil, not meat. By that point, I had no interest in meat, so I stopped eating carbs too. And I just didn't eat either for close to just about 20 years because I was convinced that both those things were bad. I consider my family what the common term now is called orthorexic. It is the fear of unclean food. Orthorexia being the term for it. The fear of eating anything that you deem unclean. The problem with that, outside of the fact that it ruins life, is that there's no such thing. There's no good food or bad food, innately. All things that come from nature have a purpose, unless they poison you, in which case that's their purpose. And we have all these ideas. Meat is bad, dairy is bad, carbs are bad, as examples, with no biology behind that. The only biology that we have to work off of is that, yes, processed foods are less nutritious and could be construed as bad. But the problem with that is that we have these bodies that have made it as far as they have in evolution because we crave sugar, salt, and fat. That's how we got here. So we created this industrialized society in which we gave ourselves unlimited access to foods containing only sugar, salt, and fat, and then we decided to guilt ourselves for wanting them. There's no winning there. Absolutely none. So your relationship with what is healthy and what is not only makes sense to be based on what physically makes you feel good and what physically makes you feel bad. And the main issue there is the fact that most of us just don't pay attention to that. So when I go into an eating plan, it's really a process of just figuring out, by way of paying attention, after you eat something, how do you feel? It's as simple as that. There is no right answer. Science can prove absolutely anything when it comes to diets and nutrition, as far as what raises cholesterol, what lowers cholesterol. Is saturated fat a problem? Is saturated fat not a problem? There are strong studies on both sides, and at this point, on the saturated fat issue, it's not a problem, but there's so much lobbying from the sugar industry that started in the 50s that it's still considered the problem, even though science isn't behind it, and the American Heart Association says, don't eat it, it's a problem. And they do so gladly and easily, despite the science, because they have the loudest voice. So it's very important when you're deciding what to eat, to be listening to you, not just because you know best, but because you only have the option of being the loudest voice. Questions? Yes?
What would a typical day menu for your day be? Obviously, depending on what you're doing. But what do you usually like to do morning, afternoon, or do you eat all day?
I'm a terrible example because I work with food. So I tend to not like preparing it for myself because I work with it for others. So I'm good at cooking when I have a person to cook for. When I am alone and I'm working, and this is just going to be honest and it's going to sound weird. I don't like breakfast. I'm a very snacky late night person. I enjoy food later in the day. I like breakfast foods, but I don't like eating in the morning. I'm convinced until about 11 or 12 every day that I would be fine if I never ate again. I have no interest. I drink coffee, which I had many years without, and which I now feel I will never, ever go without, unless there's like an actual medical reason, because everyone deserves to feel that good, and because it's actually one of the most healthful foods that you can eat. I drink coffee with about a quarter cup of heavy cream. It's about 2 squeezes of toffee-flavored stevia. It's like starting your day with melted ice cream, and it makes me very, very happy. And because I don't like food in the morning, it provides all the fuel I need, keeping me in a ketogenic state through the morning. I tend to eat a lot of the same things in phases. Greek yogurt and crackers, sweet potatoes dipped in mustard. I tend to like things that I eat with my hand, that I dip into things. I will eat Greek yogurt and crackers twice a day without issue. When I need produce, I have a tendency to eat handfuls of spring mix directly out of a bag or box because I don't actually want a salad. I just want to put something green in my body. I don't have a specific meal plan. I make a point of getting produce in my body on the daily. And I eat typically 1 meal and 3 to 6 snacks because I like snacky things, nuts, etc. I enjoy that as an act, and my body likes small amounts. Typically, it's only dinner or lunch that I eat like 1 big full meal.
Last year when you were speaking, it sounded like you enjoyed cooking and you were very creative about it. So you're saying now you are more likely to be cooking that way for others, not just for yourself.
Yes. It depends on what I'm doing. And if at this time last year I was mostly writing, then I had the capacity for food. Now that I am involved lately with food all around me all the time, I'm not very interested in it at home. I want people to feed me.
Don't we all?
Yes.
Thank you, Ariane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
A question about the group you are working with, because you're trying to take what you learned to a more broader audience or
Yes.
whatever. So I just look at the MENA group, and I found a list of restaurants there. So could you elaborate a little more about what they have been doing in terms of the line of
Sure.
nutrition and then that kind of thing?
Yeah. So this is very new. One of the first thing that I did was work with an actually already healthy concept that they just opened called Indie Superette in San Francisco. And it was already juices, smoothies, plant-based bowls, things like that. I worked with that to make the menu a little more interesting and exciting. What I'm working on currently is a restaurant called Trailblazer, which is in the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco. That's a Hawaiian restaurant. I am working on bringing more healthful options there. One thing that I will be doing next is they have a bunch of locations of a restaurant called Bourbon Steak, and I'll be bringing more vegan options to that. So that is what is currently on the table so far. It's based on what the needs of the restaurant are and where it's located. So Bourbon Steak, for example, you don't need to do anything to make it more gluten-free. It is steaks and buttery vegetables. There's very little gluten on the menu, so there's no work there. But there's butter in everything. So there's a lot of work there to just do something a little bit different and create main dishes, especially without meat. And they already have beans and rice as a side and lentils for another dish and a whole host of vegetables. So I'm mostly just working with what is on hand in new combinations so that they can appease more people and be of interest to more people.
So for the point you mentioned about the steak and the butter, so what are the sources of butter, like grass-fed or whatever?
The meat is, and they have a great Wagyu beef supplier out of Australia that specifically finishes the beef on sustainable grains like sorghum, which doesn't use corn or anything like that at all. A lot of what I've experienced in restaurants at large is when they are selective about what ingredients are organic, they don't advertise it at all. So you can have up to 50 or 75% and it's not even on the menu. When I asked, what could we do to get organic vegetables in here? The response was, go look in the walk-in. most of the vegetables are organic. But I had no idea. And on the other hand, you also have restaurants that buy organic lettuce and then like throw that all over the menu to give you the impression that you're eating an organic meal. Unfortunately, there's no way of knowing without asking. But typically, if you do ask, if your server doesn't know, the kitchen will, and they'll be able to ask them. Of course. Any others? All right, thank you for your time.